Hey, everybody. Welcome to what is our final panel as part of the 2021 Senior Capstone Project presentations. We're super excited that you're here. We have Jamie, Fern, and Matt who will be presenting their work. They've been working on it all semester. For anybody who's joining us for the first time, Capstone is a semester-long project driven by each student's individual interests. So elements of the process they have in common, but also elements that they have that were unique to their own topic and their own direction. So as the presentations go, please feel free to put comments, questions, and feedback in the chat. For the format of this panel, we're going to do all three presentations back to back. And then at the end, we will have a QA and a discussion session. So during that, I will filter in any questions or any comments that you have. So feel free to drop them in the chat along the way. And with that, Jamie, if you would like to share your screen, Fern, Matt, and I, we will turn our cameras off and you can take it away.
All right, so my website should be in the chat, but I'll start my presentation.
Hi everyone, my name is Jamie Meyer and this is my capstone project. Based on the pandemic and the seniors last year, I knew that the deliverable of our projects would be changed. I knew that they'd be online and that we would probably give them in some sort of presentation like this. So I really wanted to try and use all of my knowledge that I've gathered this entire time I've been at school to really push what I thought a user-based experience or a narrative could be online. When I first started my research, I decided to do some interviews. I asked people about their favorite products, the brands that they bought from, and why they liked them. Also, why they kept buying from them over and over again. Next, I looked at graphic designers, what they've done about political and social campaigns, as well as just their messaging. How brutal or how honest do we have to be to people to get our message across? Next, I was really inspired by surrealism art. I think while it's whimsical, it also has deep meaning that sometimes takes a little bit more time to unpack. Something that a lot of you probably don't know about me is that when I was younger, I was homeschooled, so I was able to spend a lot of intimate time outside in nature, and wow, like I can think about my childhood and it was only outside. But saying that, it's been really, really incredible to see the change from my childhood even into my early 20s of what has changed in the environmental impacts that I've even been able to witness. So during my research, I found this quote by Adbusters, and I think it's so present and it's so true today, especially with COVID. I feel like online orders and hauls are ever more present, even though people are not well and clearly things aren't going well. So I think there's so much to be said about climate change, but I think this quote really does it the best. When I first started designing my prototype, I wanted to make an augmented reality style gallery, something that would use different designed objects that would make the user question the design and the meaning behind them, kind of like Duchamp's urinal. But later I decided that I thought a website would be easier to have people interact with, as well as them understand the meaning behind it much better. I came across these website designs that were not necessarily ordinary, but they had ability to really show a narrative when scrolled. So the really cool part about this website is that the user is in complete control. So as they scroll down, they control how quickly the objects go across the screen. Unfortunately, because of screen recording and web, it really didn't like me to scroll fast, but if you go to the link in the chat, you can go visit the website yourself. But I really wanted to show how bad the problem of waste is and how it connects absolutely every single other aspect of climate change to it. And how not only is it just us as individuals that need to be held accountable, it's also the companies we purchase from, they're the ones that make these goods and they're the ones designing them. A lot of recycled products can't even be truly recycled because of the way that they're designed. So it's not only just companies to make better products and designs, it's us to stop buying those products. But as you unfold the website, you can see that there's different layers that move as well as text that goes across the screen. So I just wanted to ask the question at the end to really pry people's brains and really make them question what types of things we actually really do need as a society. This is probably a more accurate representation of how it moves on screen with the user. I really wanted to work on a project like this because I haven't seen many things done like this before. With a lot of us on our screens and on our tablets and all devices, I really wanted to create something that was different. That's not your average website that would bring a lot of different people in and you would want to share it with your friends because it's something new and different that they haven't seen before, while also educating them on something that's clearly really important. Thank you so much for coming to my presentation and listening. I really appreciate it. Have a great day.
All right, great job, Jamie. Thanks so much. All right, next up we have Fern. So Fern, if you want to start sharing your screen. For anybody who's just joining us, thank you so much for tuning in live. Please feel free to add comments and questions and feedback into the chat. We're going to do all the presentations and then we'll have a QA session at the end. So anything you put in the chat for comments and questions, we'll introduce them into the discussion. So Fern, I see your title slide, so feel free to take it away.
All right, sorry. So this is my brand, Flago Energy, and I'm gonna show you a little bit about my process of how it came to be. So why energy drinks? So short story long, I guess. Growing up, my parents were pretty strict and didn't let me drink anything other than like water or Gatorade. So I wanted to drink an energy drink, but they never let me. I couldn't even drink Kool-Aid without getting lectured, but I guess my thought was try to make an energy drink for not just like older people, because some can say like 18 plus. And so I wanted to create something more for everybody. And so I need to start off with my mascot. As you can see, Red Bull has the bull, of course. Rockstar has their star. Bang Energy has their target. Monster Energy has those scratches. And Amp has this kind of fire thing. And I struggled a little bit with what would represent my company or brand. And so I started looking at animals that I thought were like cool and like fierce and all this. And I was pretty stuck until one day, fellow flamingo enthusiast Alex Braidwood brought up the idea of flamingos, and I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, flamingos aren't badass, but he came out with facts saying that like they can drink hot boiling water and they escape zoos, and it was just like interesting because I didn't know anything about flamingos at all. So I started to get to it, and right off the bat, these are just some of my sketches, well, digital iterations, and flamingos are pink, so of course I included that. And right when I was thinking of the flamingo, I needed something else, so like I thought of the idea of fire and flamingo, so those two kind of went together. And moving on, I kind of liked the one that has like a fire, so you can clearly see the fire and the head of the flamingo, but it was too simple, so I started to complicate it a little bit, and it got to the point where it was like you can tell that it's fire, but you can also tell it's a flamingo. So that's a little bit on my process on the left. On the right, you can see a couple names that I was brainstorming. And I guess an advantage that I have that I've used with my past projects is when I can't think of a name in English, I think of what it would be in Spanish. So I'll get a little bit into that later, but this is my final logo. And here's a little bit more balanced and symmetrical, so you can see like it fits in between the circles. And here's just like a picture of flamingo plus fire equaling my logo, just to simplify things a bit. And then, so flago comes from the combination of flamingo, flavor, and fuego, which is flame or fire in Spanish. So that's where that comes to be. I wasn't trying to copy Fago, which is a soda brand. There's also a song. And here's just my style guide. So it gives you a little bit about my mission statement, how I create a healthy and quick, affordable source of caffeine, and for all ages, of course, and it's all natural, sugar-free, and without the worry of crashing. So that's a little bit about how I wanted my brand to stand out. And these colors are something I've never worked with before. I've never played around with pink or anything. And these colors, there's 4 different colors, as you can see in the logo as well. And here's my first prototype. It was not good at all, but it was kind of just to try out how my logo would look out like on the cans. So too simple. And then I moved on to something better. And here's my final design. It's flat, but it's still on the can. So that was just like reference how it would look before finalizing things and making the adjustments. So here's the final product, as you can see. And in the background, I needed to add some kind of texture. So those are flamingo feathers, and they're pink, of course. So this is my original can. So as you can tell on top, you can't really see it, but it says mental boost, sugar, 0 sugar, immunity boost, as well as electrolytes in the back, but we'll get to that in a bit. So flamin' fresa, that's strawberry in Spanish. So I kind of combined those two, kind of have like a nice ring to it, and 200 milligrams of natural caffeine. So there's a limit of caffeine a person should consume in a day. And after testing out a bunch of energy drinks, I figured Red Bull sometimes doesn't have enough and the cans are too small. So this 16 ounce was perfect for my brand, as I could fit the contents of the caffeine in there, as well as, I don't know, just the size is perfect. So here's a little bit of the back. As you can see, it has my slogan on the bottom by the barcode there, and it has the ingredients there and all the contents for that. So then I figured I can't just go on with one flavor. I have to go on with more than one. So here is another one. It's green. And while doing this, I figured that I would change the logo color as well. So it kind of combines and looks very cohesive with the rest of the can. And so here's another look at the back. So here's my third flavor. It's called Raisin Blueberry, and I try to make the flavor and like the name kind of flow a little bit, just to have a nice ring to it. And so once again, the blue texture in the back of the feathers changes with the bottle, and so do the colors. So then there's a picture of the back, nothing new. And when doing this, I thought it was very nice to look at all 3 of them together and see how, them as a brand, they look next to each other. So that was kind of what I was going for here. And this is I sponsor this team, which is actually Matt's team, which is up next in the presentation, but his team is No Fly Zone, and he's an esports team, and his favorite personal drink is milk tea. So I took NFZ, which stands for No Fly Zone, and his favorite drink, milk tea, and combine the two. And it's kind of a special edition for my brand as well as his brand to promote each other. So there's his logo at the bottom, and the colors change so they go along with the team as well. Now, when doing this, I had to have a way to catch the audience's attention. So here's a series of posters that I made. Well, here's my original flavor, the Flamin' Fresa, which is, basically a strawberry on fire, if you would. And then here's the minty melon. So there's a picture of melons and mints and the colors. Here's a third one, blazing blueberry. So it was kind of fun creating these images and bring them to life. And here's them on a mock-up. And then here's all three together. And I'm really happy of how this came out. Once again, all three of them together, it looks just whole, like, it's Flago, they go together and they just give off the same like energetic, like, I want to drink this vibe. And here's my Instagram mock-up. So as you can see, I did a series of pictures, but not just single posts. I made it as a whole. So that's kind of something that looks well on my profile here. There's the very top, and on the right, it's the very bottom. So there's my brand, and you can see the process and my prototype and my cans and everything we've covered so far. And here's my other poster that I created. So what I was trying to get at with this is using colors to my advantage and kind of putting the color pink out there so I can tell my audience when they think of pink, they think of Flago. So here's all naturals, yo sugar, long lasting energy. And there's my slogan, ignite your inner fuego. So like your inner flame or inner fire. So that represents the energy inside someone. And here's my vending machine. So when thinking of this product, I thought it would be really convenient for people to have at high schools. So here's a vending machine to kind of go with that. And of course it's pink with the flamingo texture. And I also thought about the affordability. So the price on this product would be $1. I didn't state that anywhere, but I think it'd be a nice moment to say that with the vending machine there. And here's just a little bit of merchandise that I made. And here's all three flavors. So we got the Flamin' Fresa, the minty melon, and the blazing blueberry. And I thought they're kind of fun to create. It's very minimal, but that's what all the cool kids are wearing nowadays. So I thought I would go with this design. And I'll leave you off with my favorite poster. This is my Flago can, of course, and it's like splashing in the water, as well as it has pink smoke in the back and a picture of flamingos. So I think it all works well together. And I really enjoyed making this image, so I left it for last. So hopefully you guys enjoyed my presentation of my brand, and thanks for listening.
Yeah, great work, Fern. Thank you very much. All right. So yeah, if you want to unshare your screen, Matt, if you want to turn your camera on and share your screen. For anybody who's joined us, welcome to the live stream. If you are watching on the live stream, please feel free to drop comments, questions, and feedback into the chat, and we will get to them. We're doing all three presentations. Matt is the third. And then after Matt's presentation is finished, we'll switch into the QA portion of the panel, and I will introduce the questions in the comments at that time. So if you have any questions, comments, feedback, drop them in the chat and we will talk about them when Matt is done. So Matt, if you are ready, feel free to take it away.
Awesome. Thank you.
We see a black screen. Is that correct? Here we go. Never mind.
So I'm introducing No Fly Zone Esports, shooting down the competition so no one flies higher. So the reason why I wanted to make an esports team as opposed to say another project or maybe a traditional sports team is it's just a field that I find myself really interested in. I've kind of grown up playing competitive games and I've grown up watching them as well. It's just something I find really fascinating. And I think it's a really like growing industry that in the last couple of years has really taken off with a lot of different games and a lot of different varieties. I grew up playing a lot of like Super Smash Brothers, League of Legends, a lot of different kind of games that have big competitive followings and backgrounds. And as an industry, it's growing and growing every single year. So this chart here goes from 2016 to 2027, and it's just kind of becoming a major, massive industry that's starting to become more recognized by the general public, even bars going on ESPN and being streamed through their kind of channels as well. For my research, I looked at a lot of teams that exist now. I was kind of always a big fan of like TSM, Gen G, Cloud9, all those kind of teams. So I drew inspiration from them in regards to not only their logos and their names, but also like how they interact with their fans, how they grow their fan base, and the kind of graphics that they implement into their own designs and their own kind of different like social medias and that kind of thing. In the early stages of my research and my kind of like designing, these were the first logos I'd come up with. I tried out a variety of colors, a variety of different kinds of like ways to use the NFZ. In esports, typically, there's not so many like mascots, like animal mascots. It's more so the brand itself. That's kind of a way that it's different from traditional sports. So I knew that I wanted to use the letters NFZ in the logo, as well as the fact that a lot of the times those longer names are condensed in kind of the esports world. So teams like Team Solo Mid are well known as TSM, and that's kind of the idea that I had for my brand as well. For the final logo, I chose these colors of blue and brown. I think that they fit really, really, really well together, and they look really good on a lot of different applications and backgrounds. And I also chose this style for the logo. It can be a little hard to tell at first, but the N is on the far left, the F is on the far right, and then the Z is the blue in the middle. The idea is that I wanted a circular graphic that can be put on a lot of different places. And I wanted the Z to represent kind of a circle with a cross through it, kind of, throwing back to the name of like no fly zone, like kind of limiting that. So first thing first is teams have players. So I wanted to create graphics and posters that showed that. It's a little blurry in this presentation for some reason. But as you can see on the bottom right of the poster, we have our sponsor, Flago Energy. And this is another poster I had. These are both real esports players that I took images of and kind of edited into my poster graphics. These are really popular whenever you're introducing a player, kind of hyping up a match on social media or on the website. It's pretty typical to see certain players kind of like put up on display and like kind of have their cool moment to hype up the match. These are the jerseys I created. I have the colored jersey and the black and white version, kind of a home and away type of idea, or the black and white might be used for different special purposes. As you can see, we have the logo front and center on the chest, as well as our sponsor, Flago Energy, on the top right shoulder. Jerseys are a pretty popular thing for fans to buy to support their teams. I also created a website mockup. As you can see, it shows links to our store. It has kind of the schedule for our upcoming events. There are different tabs for like the teams, the community, that kind of stuff going on. So it's a good way for fans of the team to interact. And then just another tab, this is showing our teams. So we have our different Valorant teams, League of Legends, Super Smash Brothers, Rocket League, all that kind of stuff. And then as they want to know more, they can go into those different areas. So one of the things that I think not a lot of people would realize at first is that not only are most of the graphics for an esports team going to be digital, but you also need to think about how they're going to interact in a real live space. A lot of the times the games are actually hosted live in person. So a lot of fans will come to these events and they'll sell out stadiums to host them. So I wanted to create some on-stage graphics, kind of show what it would look like at the time of a game, kind of on the scene. Kind of just like the point of view of the fans of like what they're seeing when they're visiting these matches and kind of cheering for their teams in person. The next thing is I also wanted to create merchandise. This is a great way for the fans to kind of support their teams, and it's a great way to bring in revenue for the teams as well. So I created, as you can see, a sweater and a mask. Also, the jersey that I was shown earlier was something that would be also sold as merchandise. And I also created a hat and a t-shirt, and I created mock-ups for these as well. The next thing is a lot of teams have their own kind of branded gaming like gear and merchandise and that kind of thing. So gaming chairs and headsets are super, super popular. A lot of teams, when you see kind of their team houses, they have their own kind of branded gear. And then a lot of fans like to rep those as well. And then the mouse and the mouse pad are super important. This is what the player is going to be using for their own actual equipment through the games. And then a lot of times, big companies would sponsor teams like Logitech or Corsair, and then they would actually make their own branded gear for the players. So it's a nice little cross promotion between companies that make this merchandise and then the teams themselves. And then kind of things I've learned through the process are just what it really means to like take an idea from start to finish, the kind of things that teams look at while branding, and the reason why they're branding in regards to like why they actually make their products. Most of the time it's to generate fans, have people come and like watch their events live or through a live stream, and then buy merchandise. I think it's super important to kind of look at where the industry's headed as well. And there's even talks already of maybe someday getting esports into the Olympics someday. So who knows? Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Matt. Great presentation. Okay, great presentation, everybody. So Jamie, Fern, if you want to turn your cameras back on. We've got a couple of great questions in the chat. So wait, I'm actually going to start with those. So this one is for Jamie, and this question is from Steven. Would you like to continue and expand your website to contain more information, and what companies/industries are the most at fault for shifting the responsibility? I guess that's actually two questions, sorry. So would you like to continue expanding your website to contain more information? And then which companies or industries are most at fault for shifting responsibility?
I haven't necessarily thought about going past the capstone process, but I would love to do that. I think that's a great idea, especially with like the amount of things that you could do with that, especially like industry wise, as well as like when I was doing my research, there was a lot of companies that basically are the main contributors. So doing like a section on each would be like pretty great to inform people on.
Yeah, and I think there's, even the idea that you're talking about industries, if you're not specifically naming companies, that can be really valuable. This idea of offloading the responsibility onto consumers is something that you talked about in your process and your research. And so I think that does start to come through really, really well in the narrative of your website. So yeah, great answer. Thank you. All right, so the next one is more of a compliment, but I also have a question about it. So the comment is great collaboration between Fern and Matt for this like cross pollination, like cross branding. There just is like there's a lot of synthesis there, and it's kind of awesome that you all ended up in the same sort of like presentation panel as well. How did that collaboration come together? And then what were some of the things that it did for your like thinking in terms of the role branding plays? So maybe one person take one part of that question and another person take another.
I can take the first part. So me and Fern are, at least in my opinion, pretty good friends. And a lot of times we would attend class together. We actually live pretty much together. And I know that a lot of esports teams are sponsored by energy drinks, like a team is sponsored by Red Bull, some are sponsored by Monster, that kind of thing. And I think it just like really worked out super well that it just made sense for us to do that. And it's also just kind of another way to add in more depth into our application and work together a little bit.
Yeah, like Matt said, we pretty much go to class together and work on homework together. So getting pretty tired of him. But I mean, one thing came out of this, and it was working together on this, and I think it added a lot of depth and also like a chance for me to like create something unique and like limited edition specifically for an esports team, which if this brand were to be like real, it would of course happen. Like you said, it added to his project, having that the logo on his jersey and my drink as well. It was just something that like I guess would start off as an idea, joking around, and when you're actually working on things, we're like, hey, can you send me like each other's logo? And that's kind of how it happened. So
It's a really interesting aspect to this project that I think is pretty unique, because when you are working on brands, this idea of either like co-branding or cross-branding products happens, especially like specifically in both of the industries in which you both, you chose to work. So I think it's a really great observation and a really good chance to work together. So nice job on that. Jamie, back to you. When you were working on this, what was one of your biggest challenges as you got started?
Definitely when it came to overflow and breakpoints in web, it was like I couldn't for the life of me get it has just a horizontal scroll or a vertical scroll, but it kept having a horizontal scroll. So that was one of the main issues I had to work through. And I have like another completely different site that has this horizontal scroll, but it was like literally I would add an asset, make it move, and then I would have to publish it and then go check the website and then check my other monitor to make sure that like things weren't overlapping, stuff like that. So definitely like building it out so that it was used like so you guys could actually use it and see it on all of the types of screens. So that was definitely the biggest issue.
Well, I think that's a great challenge to take on, and I want to commend you for deciding that you were going to do that, because we're not a programming department. We're not we don't go all in on coding. That's just something that maybe some folks learn a little bit along the way, but the fact that you built your project out first as a prototype and then made it production release ready, I think is very, very admirable and a really great challenge. It shows the ways that you learn. It shows the ways that you're engaging with contemporary technology. So good job getting it out and wrestling through those challenges like you described. Yeah, great. Nice. So yeah, I'm glad you did it. Thanks, Jamie. All right, next question. This is for Fern. This is from Heather in the comments. Says the contrast in your package design isn't quite as bright or visible from a distance as your competitors. How do you think you'll get market recognition so that people can seek out your product?
that's a good question. I do agree with that statement. I think my colors are an interesting choice as far as like everybody goes for basic red, blue, black, and stuff like that. So using that to my advantage and kind of attracting the viewers that way, as well as I didn't go too in depth about the ingredients, but like I said, it's sugar free, and that wouldn't be possible without I think it's stevia, the leaf extract, and it looks like mint, but it actually belongs to the sunflower family, and it's 250 and to like 300 times sweeter than sugar. So that's key ingredient, as well as ginger. So when I talked about immunity boost and mentally boosting, because energy doesn't just come from physical energy, it comes from mental as well. So ginger helps with all those things. So I guess using that to my advantage, what my product can do other than just energy, that other energy brands can't really do.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that's something that is worth underscoring in your project and in your process, is that you were very interested in the ingredients that this could contain. You were interested in how those ingredients could not only benefit like your brand decisions, but also benefit the end consumer. And I think that's a really important part of the process and the way you chose to go about it. beyond saying like, okay, energy drink, check. Now I'm going to like make some graphics for it. But you went all in and learned about the nutrition. You learned about what some of the different combinations of ingredients and materials for the product could be. And I think that's really valuable and something that in a design process gives you lots and lots of information to work from. So really, really nice job there. All right, Matt, next question is for you. Also from Heather in the chat. It said, what informed your color choices for your branding? You designed with some kind of non-traditional color combination. So how did those come about?
Yeah, so I think me and Alex had this conversation a few times about how the differences between esports and traditional sports, how instead of having a mascot in a city, esports had to kind of work in a more digital space, kind of separated from that. And I really just wanted to play with more experimental kind of color schemes that you wouldn't necessarily see in a traditional sports setting. So I thought that the blue was pretty striking, and blue is just a personal favorite color of mine. So I wanted to incorporate it in there in a less traditional sense. And then from the blue, as you can see in my presentation, originally I went with a lighter tan. At first, I just thought that the colors played really well together and they looked really well. But through more experimenting, I realized that it did not view well from a distance or on different kinds of applications. So I kind of just toned down the tan into a darker brown. And I noticed that the two colors still played really well off of each other. But on an application setting, it also view better from a distance. And also from looking at other teams and other leagues in existence already, that wasn't a color combination that I was seeing very often. And I wanted that to help me stand out a little bit.
And nice. The other thing I noticed, Matt, was when you started putting your graphics together, and I think some of this is the environment of esports, is that the graphics do seem to appear on dark backgrounds very frequently, because some of it because it's on screen. And, you know, I would imagine there's a lot of night mode in this realm where you're trying to protect your eyes, you're trying to extend the lifetime of the equipment, all these sort of reasons why we put things into like dark mode, night mode. But what that then means is your branding is very frequently going to exist in dark mode or night mode. Was that something that like played into those decisions?
Yeah, in part, definitely. A lot of the times when you're viewing traditional sports, especially live, you're going to be in person at a stadium. And most of the time it's an open air stadium. So there's going to be natural sunlight coming in, all of that. In every single esports case that I can think of, unless I'm missing something, it's all done indoors. Like you said, to protect the equipment, protect the eyes of the players, which is really important. They all wear blue lens glasses, that kind of stuff. It's pretty typical that things are going to be displayed in a darker setting, as well as, since it's almost always going to be displayed on screens, having something that plays off of that is really important for those.
Yeah, nice. It's such a growth area. There's like really really unique new constraints for what the branding needs to do. Yeah, nice work, Matt. So Jamie, when you were thinking about the ways that you were going to visualize this information, how did you decide the ways you were going to like illustrate the forms, the objects, the typography? What were some of the things that informed those decisions?
So when I first was thinking about this, I thought about using photos, but I really wanted something that looked holistic all the way down. And I knew that like illustrations would probably be the best way of showing that, as well as just like their illustrations, just like a popular trend right now. So like I was playing into that as well. But yeah, that's essentially what I was thinking, is just I knew that I could create a background. Like it was literally me just being like, how can I build this essentially? So it was, how can I make these all, like in web, it's so complicated, but how could I make all of these pieces fit together seamlessly and have them look completely whole? So that's why I chose the illustration style. And yeah.
Yeah. And then because you're basically telling a story that we scroll through piece by piece, so it's time based, but we as users are in control of the time by somewhat like the speed at which we want to scroll, but also the speed at which your animations sort of lead us to scroll. How did you divide up the messaging based on this idea of a user controlled amount of time for the narrative to unfold?
So that was kind of the tricky part. I first storyboarded out what I wanted like each part to say or each like section of like illustrations and kind of create a narrative from there. And then after like talking to peers and stuff, they were telling me that I needed to add like text and more information like that because just like viewers, it's easier to like explain that way. So I storyboarded it out and then I started making my individual pieces. And then once I essentially like figured out what I wanted to be in it, I started building it. And then honestly, like I knew at that point in time, that's when I was going to have to like figure everything out essentially, because it's like until you start making it, you really don't like, you can't plan it perfectly. So essentially, I would just, like I said, I would go in, add stuff, and then I would adjust it based on like breakpoints and also like it's like set to scroll position. So each object like is at a certain percentage based on the scroll. So I would literally just have to go in and like tweak each thing so that it would be one after the other, which I knew that that's what I wanted. But yeah, so that's essentially how I did it. Was like essentially trial and error, but like controlled trial and error essentially. So yeah.
Yeah. So you had a plan,
Yeah.
and you had some scaffolding, you had a framework of what you were like intending to accomplish, but the
Yeah.
only way to do it is to go through it, right, and put it together. And I think that's a beautiful thing to learn during a makerly or prototyping based process. So yeah, really, really nice work.
Yeah. And that's like where it came in, like literally have another site that has tons of overflow that I could never figure out. So it was essentially like I would have like 3 sites and I would just like edit one, try and figure out what was happening in that one, and then I would refer back to my other one in case that one was messed up. So it literally was just like a trial and error process with some sort of attempt at structure.
Nice. And for anybody who's just tuning in or has tuned in, there's a link in the chat at the very beginning of the chat connected to this video, to the website that Jamie built and the website that we're talking about. So whether you're watching this live now or whether you're watching this later, that link is there for everybody to see. So back to Fern, I have a question about your posters. One is, where do you think those posters could exist in order to like best gain the recognition that you're looking for?
I guess I would put them in like high schools and stuff, and as well as colleges, like just around, because as a previous high school student and you know gonna graduate here soon, I know that's what people seek. Like they seek energy and they're tired. And I was thinking about selling my product at Walmart because that's kind of like a happy medium as far as like, Whole Foods kind of expensive and like small towns don't have that. And like gas stations, that is a possible vendor I could go to. But like we discussed it before, that's if it's at a gas station, it's probably not good for you. So that's not what my brand is about. But yeah, I guess my main choice would be just around like schools and other stores as well. Maybe local stores as well that could help, their business as well.
Nice. Yeah, there's probably some limitations to like how much advertising can happen in schools and on college campuses and things like that. But the idea of branding like point of sale advertising within stores is really interesting. And those are all things that could be extensions of a project in your brand like that. So my other question about the posters is I really dug the last one that you showed. It has like the one with the photograph in the background, like the flamingos are very like menacing and powerful. The splash that's happening under the can, that poster just has so much energy. Did that come about at the end? Because it seems like a very well evolved and developed idea, maybe compared to some of the earlier ones that you showed. The earlier ones almost seem like sketches that led up to this final like powerful energized poster.
Yeah, so that was almost like pretty much the very last thing that I made, I guess. I wanted something more with an impact. Like you said, That's why I put it last as well, because I felt like that was my best one, and I executed it like very, like I thought about it, like I said, it was like a collage of a couple things, and it just added more to my can. So like more of a brand and more of the flamingo vibes, and flamingos can be badass as well. So by buying this drink, you can be badass too. Who knows?
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, that the amount of like excitement that comes from that last poster, I think is really great. And it's a good example too of what happens when you've worked on a project very intensely and you have a lot of sort of knowledge and experience and you growing the brand as you work on it. And then when you sort of have this opportunity to do this final thing, it just sort of like comes together in a really great way. Very cool. So thinking about that, so Matt, your space that you chose to work in is very much a growth area. Your chart showed it. Your excitement about it shows it. The way that you displayed your graphics as a designer, what was one of the challenges of like taking a full leap into branding inside of this growth area where the expectations maybe are not set quite as in such a solidified way as other spaces? What were some of the challenges in that?
So one of the challenges, honestly, was that as opposed to traditional sports or just other kinds of branding for teams, there's not as quite of a lengthier storied history and past that you can draw from. Like, say, if you were designing something for the Iowa State Cyclones, we have logos and different versions of the graphics that we use dating back since, the start of the university. And, having those kind of like retro logos and all that stuff is like always a really strong tool to use for team branding. But that's something that can't exist in this space just because no team has been around for that long. And when you're designing for such a digital space with such a particular fan base, any changes or edits to a logo can be very, very difficult. Um, I want to say so. There's a team called Team Dignitas, which is a pretty historic in terms of esports team. And a year two ago, a couple years ago, they actually changed their logo and just tons of backlash, and everyone hated it. And so recently, everyone that's in the esports space has said that their best marketing move of the year, I think last year, was just going back to the old logo. Uh, so, and in traditional sports, they kind of have the luxury of like, if they make a decision like that, they can kind of weather the storm and wear it out until fans come around and start enjoying it. Because I think that happens with any logo change for any team, no matter the space. Fans don't always come around to the logo changes, but since they have such a strong foundation and base, they can kind of weather it until people come around and start liking it. Esports don't really have that luxury as much because there's a ton of teams out there. Even uh, not even just mentioning like the top teams. Like if you go down to tier 2 or tier 3 or lower uh, esports teams, there's hundreds. There's almost thousands, depending on what regions you're looking at. So you really have to like move with roll with the punches, move with the stream and the current, and kind of navigate that space a little bit more carefully.
It's interesting to think about how the pace of that environment dictates like what can and can't happen within like the design and the design process. It's also like, it's always a little bit entertaining to think about how one of the more common ways in which our field of graphic design bubbles up into pop culture is when there's like massive outrage to a logo change, whether it's an app or a clothing store or whatever that might be. Those are but it's interesting to think about how the timescale of that outrage has a very different impact in the esport world. The other thing that I am sort of really aware of as you're talking is that when you're talking about branding a team, of course, we're talking about like branding talks about more than a logo, as you both showed in your work. It's much more. It includes all the other things that are difficult to maybe put your finger on in terms of like how you're representing the ideals and the quality and things like that. And so thinking specifically about sports, there's this aspect of what you're doing in the esports realm where you also don't have the geography to base your decisions on. Like sports teams are in some ways in a lot of ways, identified with a city or a region if you get up into like international play and things like that. But I'm sort of getting the vibe that in your world, there's no geographic relationship. And so everything that you are basing your branding decisions on comes from like the ethereal and the digital. Is that right?
Right. And I was wanting to bring this up actually because that's another big challenge in the esports realm is honestly, in the United States, at least, most of our teams are based in Los Angeles, West Coast, some in Texas. They're starting to gather a larger gathering of those teams. But if you went by region, it just isn't there. Traditional sports teams like NFL, MLB, all that stuff, they almost have a built-in fan base. If you're from a certain state or a certain city, you're going to be a fan of that team. Whereas we don't have that in any sense. We gather fan bases in esports through how cool our logo is, how cool our merchandise is, and then just through our star players. So a lot of the times, you're not necessarily a fan of, say, C9, you're a fan of Mango. You're not a fan of SKT, you're a fan of Faker, which is, respective players for those teams. And a lot of the times, if they switch teams or join a different league, the fans go with them, unless you can find a way to keep them through your branding, your logo, and your merchandise and all that. So even things change so quickly that even the starting roster for a League of Legends team this year could be completely different next year, save for maybe one or two star players. And there aren't massive teams for these fields. League of Legends is 5 players per team with maybe a substitute, maybe a couple. If you're a fan of like Super Smash Brothers, you might even have just 1 or 2 representatives for a team, maybe. And then it depends from game to game. And it's honestly pretty rare for people to be diehard TSM or diehard C9 fans through different games. You might be a League of Legends C9 fan, but a Gen G Valorant fan. So it really all depends, and you need to find a way to draw in those fans without kind of having that geography kind of background and a way to like keep fans of you.
Nice. Those are all just really interesting points in what separates the thinking that needs to go into branding for esports versus regular sports. Yeah, it's really, it's pretty intense, but a really like amazing growth area. Okay, so we're getting close to time, but I do want to go around and ask you all one sort of final question, which is, what do you think is your biggest success with this project or this semester? Biggest success or maybe thing you're the most excited about? So Jamie, I want to start with you. What do you think is your biggest, or what do you feel is your biggest success coming out of this project?
I honestly feel like I use knowledge from all types of classes that I've taken here at Iowa State. So like it was really cool to think about, like, I know how to like work Illustrator, so I know how to make these things. I know how to use Photoshop, so I know how to make this. I took a UX UI class, so like I know more about that. And I've done like classes with coding. So like it was that kind of like accomplishment for me to like feel like I've made something that's used all of my knowledge here, like at Iowa State. So
nice. So you built up your toolbox during all that time, and then you were able to just like fluidly move through the tools. Yeah, great answer. How about you, Fern?
Yeah, kind of the same thing, but I guess actually investing myself and dedicating myself into transforming an idea into like bringing it to life and watching it, from like my sketchbook to like these realistic mock-ups, and it's like without graphic design that wouldn't be possible. So it's kind of like I'm using all my knowledge, like Jamie said, and it's like it's a beautiful thing, I guess you can say, that I'm using my degree finally.
Yeah, that's great. And you did a nice job too of really sort of like expanding what your work could do as you settled into the development of the individual pieces. Yeah, nice work, Fern. How about you, Matt? What do you think was your biggest success coming out of this?
I would say taking myself from my point of view as a fan, you know, who's grown up kind of in this field, and putting myself in the shoes of the designer, someone who's looking at the ways that fans interact with the field, and kind of using that to my advantage, and kind of like doing all the deep research of like, well, why do people care about teams? What draws people to certain teams versus others? And how do they interact with their fans? As well as having all of this to be able to put in my portfolio, because my goal is actually to apply for teams and become a designer for an esports team.
Nice. Well, yeah, and your project was really well thought out and really thorough. So hopefully this like helps you along that path. All right. So that brings us to our time. Jamie, Fern, Matt, thank you so much for your presentations. Thank you for your projects. And also just thank you for being in my section of Capstone. It was a weird couple of semesters, but we did it. You guys did great. You went all in on the process. I appreciated all of our conversations. It was really great working with you. So thank you. And thank you for bringing really good energy to this presentation series today. Everybody who tuned in live, thank you so much for the comments and the questions. It's been great interacting with you. This is the last panel of our 2021 series. All of them are saved on this YouTube channel, so please feel free to check back, watch the ones you didn't have a chance to. And again, thank you for being here. It was a really exciting year, and I hope that you are all well. Take care, everybody.